Parents got divorced, but Dad refused custody of me because he needed time off while he always had time for my golden sister. So, I guess the best place to start is when I was 15. My parents were already fighting a lot, like, to the point where the silence at dinner was more awkward than the actual arguments. Then one day, Dad just moved out. No real explanation, no long talk, just gone. He told us he needed some time to figure things out. I guess when your whole marriage falls apart, that's the easy way to avoid dealing with your kids too, right? Mom got full custody of me and my younger sister Maria. It wasn't even a fight in court. Dad didn't push back or argue for us. He just let it happen. I think that was the first time I realized how little he was actually going to be around for me. And Maria, well, she was always the baby, you know? She's 2 years younger than me, and since she was only 13 when it all went down, I get why she needed more support. But it didn't make it hurt any less that Dad basically ignored me to focus on her. I tried to brush it off like it didn't bother me. You know how it is? You don't want to look needy. But it did bother me. A lot. He'd pick her up for lunch or take her on random weekend trips, and I'd get a quick call or text saying, "Hey, I'll catch up with you next week, all right?" Spoiler alert, he never caught up with me. Not unless Maria was involved somehow. That's what really got to me. The fact that it wasn't that he didn't have time, he just didn't have time for me. And don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but growing up, it was like I didn't exist in his world unless she was there. I tried to talk to him about it once. I remember this day clearly. He took us both out to some diner, trying to act like we were one big happy family again. I finally built up the courage to say something like, "Dad, why don't you ever spend time with me?" I thought it was a fair question, right? But he just kind of stared at me for a second, then looked at Maria and goes, "Well, she needs me right now. You're older, you understand that, don't you?" Yeah, sure, I understood it, but it still stung like hell. Then came Jane. Now, I didn't meet her right away, but when I did, man, it was clear she was going to be a problem. Dad met her at some bar, and they hit it off. I don't even know if he was really serious about her at first, or if she was just someone to hang out with. But next thing I know, she's showing up to our family dinners like she's part of the crew. And from the jump, Jane had this weird vibe where it felt like she was trying too hard. Like, you ever meet someone who just forces themselves into a situation they don't belong in? That was Jane. She'd try to make conversation with me like we were besties, and I'd just sit there, nodding and smiling. Not really giving her much because I wasn't about to act like we were cool, just because she was dating my dad. But it wasn't just that she was there. It was that Jane was obsessed with this whole "you and your dad need to reconcile" thing. I swear every time I saw her, she'd make some comment like, "Your dad just wants his daughter back. Can't you see he's trying?" And it made me so mad because it wasn't me that he wanted back. It was Maria. He was always there for her, but for me, not so much. Jane acted like she was doing me some big favor by constantly pushing me to fix things with Dad, like I was the one who broke everything in the first place. That's what pissed me off the most. Like, I didn't ask for this messed up situation. I didn't tell him to leave or to ignore me for years while playing super dad to my sister, yet somehow, I was the problem for not wanting to be all buddy-buddy with him. The first time we actually clashed, it was pretty intense. We were at Maria's apartment, just having a family dinner. It was supposed to be casual, right? We were talking about this upcoming family vacation Maria was planning with Dad and Jane. I wasn't going, obviously. I hadn't been on a family trip with Dad in years, so why start now? So when Jane asked me if I was excited about the trip, I just said, "I'm not going." Simple, direct, no big deal in my mind. But Jane didn't take it that way. She got this look on her face, like I just insulted her personally, and started asking why. Like, why wasn't I going? Did I not care about my family? Did I not want to reconnect with Dad? At first I tried to keep it calm, told her it wasn't a big deal, I just didn't feel like going, but she kept pushing, and pushing. Until finally, I snapped. I was like, "You know what, Jane? Maybe I just don't feel like spending every second trying to pretend we're one big happy family, okay?" She lost it. Started yelling about how I was being unfair, how I was shutting Dad out on purpose. And then she said it. The one thing that completely set me off. She called me my mom's lapdog. I just stared at her for a second. Like, did she seriously just say that? I was done at that point. I stood up, ready to leave, and before I walked out the door, I turned to her and said, "If you think I'm going to let you talk to me like that, you're dead wrong. You don't know me, and you don't know the first thing about what's going on between me and Dad. So mind your own business." I left after that, but I wasn't done fuming. I could hear Dad trying to defend Jane as I walked out the door, and it felt like a punch to the gut. He didn't even stop to ask why I was upset. It was all about making sure Jane wasn't upset. Maria told me later that she kicked both of them out after I left. She was pissed at Jane too, but mostly for causing a scene. I hadn't heard from Dad or Jane since that day, and honestly I was fine with that. I didn't need them stirring up more drama in my life. The way I saw it, they could stay in their little bubble and I'd stay in mine. Let them have their twisted version of a family. I was done pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. So after the whole disaster with Jane calling me a lapdog and me walking out, I pretty much avoided Dad and Jane altogether. I figured, why bother? If they wanted to live in their own little world where I was the problem, then fine, let them. Maria and I stayed close though. We weren't exactly best friends or anything, but we were cool. That's why when she called me a few months later, I didn't expect it to lead to another massive argument. It was just a normal day. I was sitting at home doing nothing special when my phone rang. I saw Maria's name pop up, and I was actually kind of excited to hear from her. But the second I picked up, I knew something was off. She sounded weird, like she was trying to keep calm but wasn't doing a very good job of it. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, not thinking much of it. She hesitated for a second, then said, "We need to talk." Now, if you've ever had someone say, "We need to talk," you know nothing good is about to follow. My stomach dropped a little, but I tried to play it cool. "Okay. About what?" She launched into this whole thing about how Dad and Jane had been talking to her, trying to smooth things over after what happened. Apparently, they were super upset about how I reacted at dinner and wanted to apologize or whatever. But here's the kicker. Maria was siding with them. She actually tried to tell me that I should have handled it better. Like what? I felt my blood start to boil as she kept going. Maria was saying how Jane wasn't really a bad person, and that she's just protective of Dad, and how I should give her a chance. At first, I was just letting her talk, trying not to blow up, but the more she went on, the harder it got to keep my cool. "Hold on," I finally interrupted her. "You're seriously telling me that I'm the one who should have handled it better? After she called me a lapdog in front of everyone?" Maria tried to backtrack, saying she wasn't blaming me but that both sides were at fault. I wasn't having it. I told her straight up, "Jane doesn't get a free pass just because she's with Dad. She's been pushing her nose into stuff that doesn't involve her from day one, and I'm sick of it." That's when Maria dropped the bomb on me. "I want Jane to be my maid of honor." I thought I misheard her for a second. I actually paused, waiting for her to laugh or say she was joking. But no, she was dead serious. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. "You're asking Jane to be your maid of honor? The woman who's been nothing but a problem?" Maria started going on about how Jane had been really supportive of her wedding planning and how she felt like they had become close over the past year. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew Jane had weaseled her way into our lives, but I didn't realize she had gotten this close to Maria. I couldn't help but feel like I was being replaced. Here I was, her older sister, the one who had been with her through thick and thin, and now she's choosing Jane, the woman who had barely been around for 2 years, to stand beside her on her big day. It was a slap in the face. "Maria, come on," I said, trying to stay calm. "You've known Jane for what, 2 years, and you're putting her above me? Your own sister?" She tried to justify it, saying it wasn't about picking sides or anything, but that she just felt closer to Jane now. I could feel my patience slipping away. I told her, "Look, I'm happy for you and your wedding, but if you think I'm going to stand next to Jane at the altar and act like everything's fine, you're dreaming. I'm not being part of the bridal party if she's in it." Maria was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her sniffling on the other end of the line. She started crying, which honestly didn't surprise me. She had a way of turning on the waterworks when things didn't go her way. "I really want you to be part of my big day," she sobbed. "You're my sister. I need you there." I softened a bit because, it was her wedding. I wasn't trying to ruin her day, but I also wasn't about to let Jane walk all over me again. "I'll still be at the wedding," I said, trying to find some middle ground. "I wouldn't miss it, but I'm not going to be a bridesmaid if Jane's your maid of honor. That's just how it's going to be." Maria begged me to reconsider. She kept saying how much it would mean to her if I'd just let it go, but I stood my ground. "I love you, Maria, but I'm not putting myself in that position again. Jane and I don't get along, and I'm not going to pretend like we do just for the sake of appearances." Eventually, she said she understood, but I could tell she was still upset. She kept sniffling and sighing, like I had just shattered her entire wedding dream or something. It wasn't an easy conversation, but I felt like I had to be honest. I wasn't going to sacrifice my own boundaries just to make everyone else happy. After we hung up, I sat there for a while thinking about how everything had gotten so messed up. I never expected things to turn out this way. When Dad first left, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd be able to fix things down the road. But then Jane showed up, and everything spiraled. It's like she wormed her way into Maria's life, and now I was the one being left out. A few days later, I got a text from Maria saying she had thought about everything and decided to go ahead with Jane as her maid of honor. She thanked me for being understanding and said she was looking forward to having me at the wedding, even if I wasn't a bridesmaid. I didn't respond right away because, honestly, I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt like I was losing my sister to Jane, and it hurt way more than I expected. But in the end, I stuck to my guns. I wasn't about to let Jane or Dad guilt me into doing something I wasn't comfortable with. If they wanted to play happy family without me, then fine. I'd be there for Maria on her wedding day, but that's it. I wasn't going to fake a smile or pretend everything was perfect. Not for them, and not for anyone. Update 1. So after that mess with Maria and her whole Jane is my maid of honor thing, I figured things would cool down for a bit. I wasn't about to chase anyone down to keep the peace. Honestly, I was just focused on not letting the whole situation take over my life. But then, just when I thought I had some space to breathe, Dad decided to get involved again. It started with a message from him. I saw his name pop up on my phone, and I knew right away it wasn't going to be a fun conversation. We hadn't spoken since the fight at Maria's, and I figured he'd taken Jane's side, as usual. But this time, it wasn't just about that. No, this time Dad was on some mission to guilt trip me. The message went something like this. Hey, we need to talk. This situation with Maria's wedding is getting out of hand. You're hurting her by not being involved. You need to apologize to Jane and we can all move forward. I stared at my phone for a good minute, just trying to process the nerve of this guy. Apologize to Jane? For what exactly? For standing up for myself when she called me a lapdog? For not bending over backwards to make her feel comfortable after she completely disrespected me? Yeah, no thanks. So I shot back a simple reply. I'm not apologizing to Jane. I'll be at the wedding, but that's it. Let it go, Dad. Of course, that didn't fly with him. He sent me a long rant about how I was being difficult and that this whole situation was childish. He even had the nerve to say I was ruining Maria's big day. Because, apparently the only way for Maria to have a happy wedding was for me to pretend Jane wasn't a problem. Now, here's the thing about Dad. When he gets an idea in his head, he doesn't let go. So, over the next few days, he kept sending me messages. Same stuff every time. How I needed to fix this. How I was making things worse. Blah, blah, blah. Honestly, it was exhausting. And the worst part? I knew it wasn't just him. I could almost hear Jane in the background, egging him on, making sure he kept pushing me. Finally, after about a week of nonstop texts, I decided to call him and just get it over with. I couldn't deal with the constant messages anymore. And I figured maybe if I actually talked to him, he'd back off a little. Spoiler, he didn't. The second he picked up, he launched into it. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Jane's trying to make things right and you're just shutting her down. Maria's upset and you're making everything harder for her. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Dad, I'm not the one who started this. Jane insulted me in front of everyone and you didn't say a word. You just let it happen. So, forgive me if I don't feel like playing nice with her right now. He didn't get it. Or maybe he didn't want to get it. He kept going on about how Jane was just protective of him and how she was only trying to help. It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter how many times I explained my side, he just didn't care. To him, I was the one making things difficult. Then he dropped the real kicker. If you don't apologize to Jane, don't expect us to have a relationship after the wedding. I actually laughed out loud when he said that. You think threatening to cut me off is going to make me apologize? Good luck with that. That's when things got really heated. We went back and forth for what felt like forever, him throwing guilt trips at me and me standing my ground. He kept talking about how I was hurting the family and how I needed to grow up. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I wasn't about to let him or Jane guilt me into something that wasn't right. Finally, I'd had enough. You know what, Dad? If you want to pick Jane over your own daughter, that's your choice. But don't expect me to just roll over and let her walk all over me. I'm done with this conversation. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking, and I felt like my whole body was on fire. I was angry, yeah, but more than that, I was hurt. My own dad was willing to cut me off because I refused to apologize to his girlfriend. A girlfriend who had done nothing but cause problems since she showed up. After that call, I decided I was done trying to fix things with Dad. I mean, what was the point? He'd made it clear that Jane was more important to him than I was, and honestly, I wasn't going to keep putting myself in a position where I had to compete for his attention. If he wanted to be with Jane and let her run the show, fine. But I wasn't going to be part of it. A few days later, Maria called me again. This time she wasn't crying or begging. She was pissed. Why are you making everything so hard? She demanded the second I answered the phone. I blinked, completely caught off guard. Excuse me? Dad's been telling me about your conversation. He said you refused to apologize to Jane and now everything's a mess. Why can't you just let it go? It's not that big of a deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Maria, Jane called me a lapdog in front of you. In front of everyone. How is that not a big deal? She apologized, Maria shot back, and you're the one holding on to it. This is my wedding, and all I'm asking is for you to get along with her for one day. Can't you do that for me? I wanted to scream. It was like everyone had completely forgotten what had happened. It's not just about the wedding, Maria. This is about years of Dad ignoring me, about Jane sticking her nose into things that don't involve her. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine just because it's your big day. She let out a frustrated sigh. You're being so selfish. This isn't just about you, you know. I'm trying to make everyone happy and you're making it impossible. I couldn't take it anymore. I'd reached my limit. You know what, Maria? If that's how you feel, then maybe I shouldn't come to the wedding at all. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to decide what to say. Finally, she spoke and her voice was cold. Fine, if that's what you want. I didn't respond. I just hung up and stared at my phone, feeling completely drained. Everything had blown up in my face, and now it felt like I was losing my entire family over something that should have never been an issue in the first place. Update 2. So, after that phone call with Maria, things went completely downhill. I thought maybe she'd cool off after a few days and we could talk it out, but nope, it was radio silence from her end. I wasn't about to chase her down, though. If she needed time to calm down, fine. I needed time too. But what I didn't expect was for Dad to pull the next move. Out of nowhere, I get this formal-looking letter in the mail. Like, who even sends letters anymore, right? I thought it was junk mail or something, but when I opened it, I saw my dad's name at the bottom. And that's when I realized this wasn't some casual thing. Dad was serious. The letter was basically him saying that if I didn't come to the wedding and make amends with Jane, I would be formally uninvited. Yeah, you heard that right. Formally uninvited from my own sister's wedding, like it was some corporate event and I had failed the dress code or something. It didn't even sound like it came from him, to be honest. The whole thing was written like a lawyer had drafted it. I could practically feel Jane's fingerprints all over it. I sat there staring at this stupid letter, and all I could think was, are you serious right now? I mean, it wasn't even about the wedding at this point. It was the fact that Dad thought he could just push me around with this formal crap, like it was some kind of ultimatum. Either I suck it up and apologize, or I don't show up at all. So, I did what any sane person would do. I called him. I wasn't about to let this go without saying something. He picked up after a few rings, and I didn't even give him a chance to start. What the hell is this? I snapped, holding the letter in my hand even though he couldn't see it. Dad didn't miss a beat. It's what needs to happen if you're going to be part of this family. You can't keep holding on to this grudge, and if you're going to refuse to apologize, then it's best you don't come. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're seriously telling me I can't come to my own sister's wedding unless I apologize to your girlfriend? Do you even hear yourself? She's not just my girlfriend, he said, sounding way too calm for how angry I was. She's part of this family now, and if you can't accept that, then you're the one causing the problem, not her. I was so mad I could barely think straight. This isn't about accepting her, Dad. This is about how she treated me. You're acting like it's nothing, but she called me a lapdog and you just sat there and let it happen. You're overreacting, he said, like it was no big deal. Jane's been nothing but supportive of Maria, and you're the only one who seems to have an issue with her. I couldn't help it. I laughed, but not in a funny way. It was one of those bitter, disbelieving laughs. Of course I'm the problem, right? It's always me. Never mind the fact that she disrespected me in front of everyone. Never mind that you didn't stand up for me even once. Nope, it's all on me. You're blowing this way out of proportion, he insisted, his voice starting to get that frustrated edge to it. This isn't just about you. It's about the family. Maria's wedding is supposed to be a happy day, and you're the one making it difficult. That was it. I was done. You know what, Dad? If you want to throw your weight behind Jane and act like I'm the bad guy, fine. But don't expect me to just roll over and apologize for something that wasn't my fault. And don't you dare try to guilt me into thinking I'm ruining Maria's day. That's on you, not me. Before he could say anything else, I hung up. My hands were shaking again, just like they had been after the last call. I couldn't believe how far this had gone. I mean, how did we get here? How did we go from Dad walking out of my life to him choosing Jane over me, all over some stupid wedding drama? For the next few days, I tried to keep busy, but it was impossible not to think about everything. Maria hadn't reached out since our last conversation, and part of me wondered if she even cared that I wasn't going to be there. It felt like my whole family was just gone. Like I was the outsider now, looking in at a life I used to be part of, but wasn't welcome in anymore. Then, just when I thought I'd heard the last of it, I got another message. This time, it was from Maria. I was almost scared to open it, to be honest. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. Sure enough, the message was short and cold. If you're not going to apologize, don't bother coming to the wedding. It'll be easier for everyone that way. I stared at my phone, not even sure how to respond. Easier for everyone? What about me? Was I just supposed to disappear from their lives because I didn't want to play nice with Jane? It was like they had all decided that I was the problem, and the only way to fix it was to cut me out completely. Part of me wanted to fight back, to show up at the wedding anyway and make a scene. But deep down, I knew it wasn't worth it. They had made their choice. Dad had made his choice. And as much as it hurt, I wasn't going to beg to be part of a family that didn't want me. So, I didn't respond. I didn't text Maria back. I didn't call Dad. I just let it go. Or at least I tried to. But it's not like you can just switch off years of hurt and betrayal. It sticks with you, even when you don't want it to. As the days went by, I kept thinking about all the things I could have said, all the things I should have said. But in the end, what difference would it have made? They had already made up their minds, and I was just a loose end they didn't want to deal with anymore. It's funny, you grow up thinking your family's supposed to have your back no matter what. But then something like this happens, and you realize that blood doesn't mean what you thought it did. I was done trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. If Dad and Maria wanted Jane in their lives, they could have her. But they weren't going to have me. Not anymore. Update 3. So, the wedding day came and went, and yeah, I didn't go. I wasn't expecting any warm invites or last-minute apologies, and I definitely wasn't expecting any, "Are you sure you're not coming?" texts from Dad or Maria. The silence was pretty much the confirmation that they were fine with me being absent. It stung, though. I won't lie. I always pictured myself standing next to Maria on her big day, being a part of something important in her life. But now, I was sitting at home, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the fact that my own family was off pretending like I didn't exist. I kept telling myself it was for the best, that showing up would have only made things worse, and honestly, it probably would have. There's no way I could have stood there watching Jane play happy family without saying something, and I wasn't about to start drama at Maria's wedding. Still, it felt wrong. Like I was missing out on something I should have been a part of, but wasn't allowed to be. Then, a few days after the wedding, I got hit with the fallout. I thought the worst was over, but nope. Apparently, it was just beginning. It started with a flood of social media posts. I'm not the type to go digging through other people's profiles, but of course, my feed was full of pictures from the wedding. Everyone looked so happy, smiling like nothing was wrong. There was Maria in her wedding dress, looking gorgeous, standing next to Jane and Dad, like they were one big perfect family. And there was Jane, right in the middle of it all, smiling like she had just won some prize. No sign of me anywhere, obviously, and the captions, oh man, the captions were the worst. Such a beautiful day with the whole family. So happy to be surrounded by loved ones. Every single post felt like a punch to the gut. It was like they were rubbing it in my face, like they were making a point to show just how fine everything was without me there. I tried to ignore it, but it was everywhere. People I didn't even know were tagging me in posts, asking why I wasn't in any of the pictures. I had to mute my notifications just to get through the day. But the worst part? The messages. I started getting DMs from family members I hadn't talked to in years, asking me why I hadn't gone to the wedding. My cousin, who I hadn't seen since we were kids, sent me this long message about how disappointed she was that I couldn't put aside my issues for Maria's big day. She said I was being selfish, that family was supposed to come first, no matter what. Like she had any clue what had been going on. Then came the messages from my aunts and uncles, people I didn't even think cared about me anymore. They all had the same tone. Why couldn't you just make peace for one day? You should have been there for Maria's sake. It was like they were all on Dad and Jane's side. Like I was the only one who saw how messed up this whole situation was. One of my aunts even went as far as to say, "I don't know what your problem is with Jane, but she's part of the family now. You need to get over whatever grudge you're holding and apologize before you lose everyone." Lose everyone? Really? It felt like I already had. I didn't respond to any of them. What was the point? They had all made up their minds. To them, I was the problem, and nothing I said was going to change that. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, that after the wedding, they'd move on with their lives, and I could finally get some peace. But no, Jane wasn't done with me yet. About a week after the wedding, I get this message from her. Just seeing her name pop up on my phone made me want to throw it across the room. I didn't want to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was long, way too long, and it was the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever read. She started by saying how sorry she was that I couldn't make it to the wedding, and how much she had been looking forward to burying the hatchet between us. She said she had hoped the wedding would be a chance for us to finally put everything behind us and start fresh, like we were just going to magically become best friends or something. Then she went on to say how hurt Maria was that I didn't show up, how it had ruined what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She kept throwing in these little jabs like, I know family can be complicated, but sometimes you just have to rise above the pettiness. Petty? She was calling me petty? She ended the message by saying that she hoped, in time, I would come to my senses and realize how important family is. And if I was ready to apologize, she'd be willing to forgive and forget everything that had happened. The audacity of this woman was unreal. I didn't even bother responding. There was nothing to say. She was never going to see things from my side, and honestly, I was done trying to make anyone understand. If Dad and Maria wanted Jane to be their new family, then fine. They could have her. But I wasn't about to apologize for standing up for myself. In the weeks that followed, I cut off contact with pretty much everyone. I stopped answering texts, stopped checking social media. It was easier that way. I wasn't going to keep putting myself in the line of fire just to be torn down again and again. It's weird, though. You spend your whole life thinking family is supposed to be the people who have your back no matter what. But sometimes, they're the ones who hurt you the most. And in the end, I realized that just because someone's blood doesn't mean they're worth holding on to. So yeah, I didn't go to the wedding. And maybe that makes me the bad guy in their eyes. But at least I know I did what was right for me. And if they can't accept that, well, that's their problem, not mine.